Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stephen Glenn, and I am the Environmental Services Specialist for Ventura Water. Today, we have the Surfrider Foundation with us doing a presentation on the Ocean Friendly Gardens Tour. In the past, we have done this as an in-person event where everyone would come and would walk around. This year with the virtual format, it's going to be a little bit different. We have a video doing the tours part of the class, and then we will come back for a PowerPoint presentation after the video is done. So with that, I will go ahead and play the video.
Hi, my name is Laura Bauer, and I am here with Surfrider Foundation, Ventura County chapter of Ocean Friendly Gardens. And we're going to take a little garden tour today virtually. So let's talk a little bit about Ocean Friendly Gardens and what the program is about. We talk about it in terms of CPR for your garden, and that is conservation, permeability, and retention. The idea behind that is to hold on to stormwater on your property. It doesn't rain that much in California, and then when it does, what happens is all that water gets shed off of your property into our storm gutters, right down into the ocean, and makes our beach water dirty. So that's one of the main reason why Surfrider started the Ocean Friendly Gardens program, because if we can get people to change their landscape, we can actually cut down on that stormwater pollution by a lot. As a bonus, you get to have a beautiful garden. So let's talk about what that means. Conservation, part of it is using what we call climate appropriate plants and keeping a low water use. And by climate appropriate, we encourage people to use mostly California native plants. Sometimes they're a little hard to find, but there are more and more of them on the market. They're beautiful plants, and they can give you color all year round. And we also, this garden here is not strictly California natives, so we also encourage people to use climate appropriate plants like some succulents, other plants from other Mediterranean areas, plants from South Africa, Australia, but we do encourage people to use mostly native plants. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. Permeability, we are asking people to use permeable landscape materials that allow the water to soak into the landscape. Mostly that means mulch as opposed to just dry soil. And the mulch not only provides insulation for the plants, it can also soak up water when it rains, and then it keeps the plants cooler in the summer. And then for retention, so CPR, conservation, permeability, and retention, this is one of the really fun parts of the Ocean Friendly Gardens, because it's such an easy thing to do, but it's not something that the landscape industry really thought of. Retention, we're talking about trying to hold as much water on your property when it rains as possible. And a very easy way to do that is if you have gutters or downspouts, is instead of having those turned onto your driveway, actually turn them back onto your property and create a swale and berm system so that when it rains, the water actually flows onto your property, is held in a swale, which is like a dip, and is allowed to sink into your soil and actually recharge the groundwater instead of having it all just run off and into the ocean. And so we can take a look right behind me. We had downspouts here, and we've actually replaced them with a rain chain, which is another option. Simply when it rains, all the water from our roof, which is an impermeable surface, all of that water is shed into the garden, and then we've created a series of very shallow swales through this whole property. It's kind of like an S-curve. And actually when it rains hard, and even when it rains those cloud bursts of 2 inches an hour, all of that water is actually held in this garden and then slowly permeates, percolates into the ground. And so it actually stays in our soil and feeds those plants through a long period of time, which makes it possible for me to water this garden only about once a month through the summer. In the winter, I don't water at all because all the plants get as much water as they need from from our winter rains. But this is a garden tour, so let's talk about the plants. I'm going to point out some of the more fun ones here, and not all of them are native. So the first one here is this beautiful Drosanthemum. This is a South African succulent. It has these gorgeous flowers, very, very drought tolerant, very low water, and it's kind of a mounding plant. I also want to point out these little low growing plants over here. Those are different varieties of pelargoniums, which are very closely related to geraniums, but they're from South Africa, from very dry areas. And these little guys actually bloom almost all year round. They're little tiny plants. They don't get much bigger than that. In fact, these plants are probably about at least 4 years old. So, and they're just covered with flowers almost all year round. Again, not native to California. We're going to talk about natives in a second. But just really wonderful plants for those tiny little areas where you don't want anything that's going to get too big. And they're very, very easy to take care of. They bloom, again, almost all year round. When they're finally done blooming, they take a little break, maybe in December and January. The old flowers just kind of fall off and they start over again. Very, very easy plants and lots of color. So here we have a couple of our wonderful native plants, and a lot of the plants in this garden in particular are from the California Channel Islands area, because we're in coastal Ventura, and the Channel Islands are just right there. We are basically the same climate. Now, if you happen to be in Ojai or Thousand Oaks, it's a little bit warmer, obviously. But here on the coast, I can grow a lot of the plants that are native to the California Channel Islands, and there's a lot of really interesting island endemics, meaning that they're only found there, which are actually wonderful garden plants. And one of them is this guy. This is Island Bush Snapdragon, with this beautiful bright red, very hummingbird-friendly flower. And it's kind of a sprawling plant, got this beautiful evergreen, kind of shiny green foliage, and just a really great little kind of sprawly plant. And then this is, of course, our local monkey flower. This is the chaparral type monkey flower, or sticky monkey flower, and it has yellow flowers. We have some other varieties in this garden that have different colored flowers, but this is the kind of standard one that you see in the hills around us. So I just want to point out where this swale goes in this garden. So we have one downspout here, and then it actually follows, there's another one over there, and this little dry creek bed comes all the way through here, and it circles back around, makes kind of a W, and then there's another rain chain behind me. So all of the water that's shed off of our roof to the front of the house here actually goes into the garden. It doesn't have to be very deep. Right now it looks deep, but actually when we built this, it was just a flat landscape. So, digging down a few inches and then piling the soil in between those berms gives you a difference of 12 inches as opposed to 6. So it looks deeper than it is. And it really doesn't have to be that deep to hold a lot of water. On our website, or with a little Ocean Friendly Gardens booklet, we can give you the information on how to find out how big of a swale you would need to on your property in order to hold the water from your roof. But what I can tell you right now is it actually doesn't have to be as big as you think it does. I also want to talk a little bit about seasonality. We're sort of in a transition right now because it's the beginning of May when we're filming this. And so you're going to see some of these plants are starting to get yellow. They have sort of yellowy leaves, and they're not dying, they're just starting to go to sleep. And that is important for a lot of dry adapted plants. These in particular are bulbs. These are sometimes called naked ladies, Amaryllis belladonna. They have leaves and foliage that comes up with the rains in the winter, and then it actually will die down to the ground and be completely dormant in the summer. And then in about July or August, it'll put up these big, tall, beautiful, big pink flowers. So that's always kind of a nice surprise in the middle of summer to have something like that going on. When a lot of the other plants that are blooming right now in the spring, like the monkey flowers, for example, this is their time to shine. And then they're going to start to sort of get a little blonde, a little brown, and stop blooming probably by about end of June. And then they're going to be quiet and sleepy for the rest of the summer. Then again, when the rains come on, they start regrowing and they'll bloom again next spring. So try to kind of keep in mind seasonality when designing your garden. Because we have, again, spring flowers, and then we have summer flowers, and then when we walk around a little bit, we'll see some of the other plants that will bloom really in the fall and give me more color later in the year. So here we are on the other side of the garden, and I can point out a few more plants. This one beautiful thing here is native, and that is our it's Guadalupe Island daisy, Perduli incanum, and that's actually from sort of the Baja region of California. And also these big purple guys over here are Baja verbena. So when we say California natives, we're also including some plants from the Baja area, which seem to do very well, Baja on the coast. And so this is verbena lilacina, delamina. It's very common in the garden stores now, and it's a really wonderful plant, very fragrant flowers. I'm sorry you can't smell them, but also tends to bloom almost all year round. So that's a really great one. A couple of the plants right here are actually fall bloomers. So this is one of our buckwheats. This is ashy leaf buckwheat, Eriogonum cinereum, and this is not even flowering yet. It's just starting to put up buds. So this is going to flower later in the year. Usually starts about end of June and into the fall. Very, very important plants for our native insects. One of the reasons why I encourage people to grow California native plants is not just for the butterflies, but also for all the other insects and birds that use these plants. So once these flowers fade, they're like little kind of pom-poms, they're sort of pink pom-poms. The birds will come in and eat the seeds off of them. So a very important plant for nectar in the later part of the year when a lot of the spring plants are done blooming. And we also have this plant down here, which again is a fall bloomer. This is our called California fuchsia, but no real relation to the garden fuchsias that you see. This is a very drought-adapted flower with a bright red tubular flower in the again in the late summer into fall. Sometimes called epilobium, sometimes called zauschneria, but it also called California fuchsia. And this is a real favorite for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love this plant, and again, because it flowers not in the spring, but in the later part of the year, it's a really important plant to have in your garden. This big yellow guy behind me here is one of our bush poppies, Dendromecon. This is actually Dendromecon rigida, which is the species that lives here on the coast of California. If you can find them, what you're usually going to find is Dendromecon harfordii, which is the island bush poppy, which is bigger and has a rounder leaf. But both of them have these beautiful yellow flowers, again, almost all year round. They're evergreen. They take a little break in the winter, but you can see they're just flowering like crazy. And I had a very large Dendromecon harfordii, the island bush poppy, right over here. We'll take a look at that in a second. It fell over in the bad windstorms in January, so that's why there's a big gap in the garden, and we'll take a look at that in a second. I also want to point out this plant here in the center is one of our manzanitas. When I think of California, manzanitas are one of our most important plants and most iconic. This is a plant called Arctostaphylos viridissima white lanterns, I believe. And it's an island species from Santa Cruz Island. But like all manzanitas, it's evergreen, very tough plant. This is one of the ones that grows upright, and it gets that beautiful red bark when it gets big enough. This garden has been in since 2012. So this plant is almost 10 years old in the ground, and it's just starting to really, get some size on it. Manzanitas all bloom in the winter, so they have little hanging bell-like flowers in the winter. Very important plant for nectar, for insects, and for hummingbirds, actually, will come to the manzanita flowers. Bumblebees, our native bumblebees, are also big fans of manzanita flowers. So really good plant to have in your garden. There are also many low-growing varieties that do very well. This just happens to be one of the big ones. And last plant to point out is that taller tree-like plant in the center there. That's related to manzanitas, but it's actually called summer holly, Chimerostaphylos diversifolia. And summer holly is a plant that has flowers like a manzanita, but it blooms in the spring, well, late spring. It hasn't started blooming yet. And then it has red berries in the summer. And again, birds love it. So it's very slow growing. That again was just a small plant 10 years ago, and it's finally getting to be somewhat tree-like. We do have a lot of really wonderful bulbs that are native to California. But unfortunately, it seems like the gophers really enjoy them as well. So I do have a few bulbs planted around. Right now, we have some golden stars that are blooming right here. I keep them in a pot just to keep them out of reach from the critters. But we have some golden stars, and then this is one of our native dicholostoma, sometimes called blue dicks, that has a purple flower. And you'll see those a lot, in the trailhead in spring. We also have one little purple penstemon here that kind of got overshadowed by this guy, but he's blooming right now with this purple. That's a Penstemon spectabilis, one of our native beard tongues. Another iconic plant that I always think of for California is our ceanothus, sometimes called California lilac. This is a big variety. This is Ceanothus arboreus, which is the native to the Channel Islands. And it's got kind of a powdery blue flower. It's pretty much done flowering right now, but if you were here about a month ago, this was just kind of covered in light blue. And it is one of the bigger varieties. And the reason it's kind of leaning over here is because I did have the big cousin of this plant here. This is Dendromecon rigida, the coastal bush poppy, but I also had a Dendromecon harfordii, which is the island bush poppy, which pretty much grew over this whole area here. It was about 15 feet tall, and unfortunately it blew over in the big windstorm in January. So gardens change. There's always opportunities whenever something bad happens. So because that plant was so ginormous, I actually thought, yeah, I don't really want to plant that again. I want to plant this plant called bladderpod, which is also a yellow flowering plant called Isomerus arborea, also called bladderpod. And it's a really wonderful plant for, again, for butterflies, insects, and hummingbirds will all come to the flower. And I put it right there next to the burl where the old Dendromecon fell over because nothing was happening. And then lo and behold, about a month ago, the Dendromecon started growing back from the roots. So now I have a little bit of a dilemma because I need to figure out which plant I want to keep. But we'll get a close-up in here, and you can see where that Dendromecon decided not to give up, and it's going to grow back and probably fill this space again in a couple of years. All right, well, thank you for taking a look at my garden today. This is the front yard, so I'm on Dean Drive. Feel free to drive by and see how the garden grows. If you see me out here working, you're welcome to ask me any questions about the plants. right. Well, here we are at another beautiful ocean-friendly garden. This is the garden of Melissa and Rick here in Ventura. And I think it is about 2 years old. Wow, okay, so you can see a lot of these plants grow quickly. We did not start them from big plants. Most of these were 1 gallon, so just little things. That's another important thing to know for when you're planting your garden. It's tempting to want everything to be, big and full all at once, but really it's better if you start with smaller plants. It gives them they have a better chance of establishing their roots, which is so important for a lot of plants that are drought tolerant. So be patient, start with smaller plants, and in 2 years, this little tiny plant will turn into something like this. Same thing can happen with bigger plants, but I think the smaller plants actually will catch up and grow faster. So just to point out a couple features that makes this an ocean-friendly garden. Conservation, we're using a lot of California native plants, some Southwestern and South African plants as well, and we'll point those out in a minute. Permeability, we've got beautiful mulch through this whole area so that all the water can soak into the ground. And retention. She's redirected her downspout. She actually has a water barrel as well. So water barrels are great, but it seems, you think 50 gallons is a lot of water, but maybe in the first half an inch of rainfall, they're full. So they're wonderful for collecting rainwater because you can use it later. But we really, for actual retention, we encourage people to do what Melissa and Rick did, which is turn your downspout onto your garden and build a little swale. We'll go into the garden a little bit you can see it. So her downspout goes underneath the sidewalk, and then it just flows into this big open area, which is the swale. And again, with the swale, a lot of times you'll see people fill them with rocks to look sort of like a dry stream bed. You don't necessarily have to do that. Rocks are nice. But in this particular case, you'll see it is just an open area covered in mulch. And then what we planted in the center of it are plants that are naturally adapted to boggy areas in the winter that dry out in the summer. So we've got a couple of species of California native plants that actually really prefer that sort of location and do very well, even though they don't get a lot of water in the summer, and they can actually be submerged for a day or two when it rains hard enough. And it does rain hard enough to actually fill this whole swale up, but they've never had a problem with it overflowing. So let's talk about the plants. We've got some Southwestern natives here. This wonderful bright yellow guy here is called Sundrops, Callilophus. And behind it is another Southwestern sage, Salvia shamadrioides, with the blue flowers and the silver foliage. We've got another one of our little South African pelargoniums. This is Pelargonium pseudoides burgundy. And this big beauty here with the purple lavender flowers is our native seaside daisy, Erigeron glaucus. And then we've got some bigger sages here. This is Salvia lemonii. And then she's got some of these wonderful grasses over by this is the north side of the house, so it's a little bit shadier. And we've got some big tufty grasses, carex, divulsa, and the yellow flowering plants are native columbine. This is Aquilegia chrysantha, actually native to the southwest, but very similar to our California native Aquilegia formosa, which has an orange flower. And we just moved the camera so we can get some shots of a few more plants in this wonderful garden. This guy is Mexican tulip poppy, Hunnemania fumarifolia, or Mexican tulip poppy. It's also in the poppy family, so it's related to our California poppies, but it's got a bright yellow flower. And right behind of it is one of our native sages. Again, you really can't have a California garden, in my opinion, without a couple of sages. And this is a smaller growing sage variety called Bonbon. It's in the purple sage family, so it's got kind of that grayish leaf and purple flowers. It looks like it's hasn't quite started flowering yet. We've also got the swale in the center here, and if you can see it, there are just starting to flower is a native California aster, Aster chilensis, although I think they changed the name on it, but Aster chilensis will work. And that is a great plant for a swale area because it covers that whole area, and then it blooms in the spring into the summer. Oh, and we've got a hummingbird visiting the Salvia limonii. We also have some, I see a bumblebee or two, and we also have some yarrow. The yarrow is small, so it's hard to see, but it's like a ferny leaf, and it's got pink or white flowers. The main species for California is white, but from the islands, or Channel Islands areas, there's a variety that has a pink flower. It's called island pink. And I also want to point out this beautiful tree. This is Catalina cherry. This is actually in the cherry family. It does have a fruit on it, which is mostly pit and very, very bitter. Not poisonous, but not very good to eat either. But it's a beautiful, small, ornamental tree, and it's just starting to flower. It's got these cute little fuzzy white flowers, and it's a fairly small tree. It's not going to get bigger than about 30 feet. Okay, a couple other plants to point out in this beautiful garden is, we already talked about this tree. You can see some more of the flowers on here. Again, Catalina cherry. And then we also have this plant here, which is one of our buckwheats. This is a Santa Cruz variety of giant buckwheat, sometimes called St. Catherine's lace. But you can see they're just starting to put up these big bunches of flowers. And it's a much later bloom. So things like this Calilophus will bloom almost all year long, the yellow sundrops. The Pelargonium pseudoides burgundy is going to bloom almost all year long. The seaside daisy with the lavender flowers, that's a spring bloomer. And then things like the buckwheat are going to be more into the summer and fall bloomers. So we want to have things that are going to be available for the insects all year long. I also want to point out we've got a few nice rocks in here to go with the mulch, and rocks are really good for baby plants. We call them nursery rocks. If you put it on sort of the south or western side of where you plant a little baby plant, it actually acts as sort of an insulation. It keeps them cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter because the rocks can kind of absorb heat during the daytime and they will release it back into the soil. And then the other thing that we wanted to, or I wanted to just point out is where do you get all these plants? We have our local nurseries like Green Thumb and Armstrong. If you're over in the Thousand Oaks area, they can special order a lot of native plants, but we do have a few local nurseries here. Matilaha Nursery up in Somas. It grows a lot of native plants, and a few of the southwestern plants like this Calilophus. And we also have a small nursery in Camarillo called Growing Works. I'll give them a shout out. They are part of Turning Point Foundation, so they are actually providing horticultural training to their customers, their clients. And it's not open to the public except on special days. So if you look up Growing Works by Turning Point, they'll have their days publicized when they're open for sales. The other thing that we want to point out is when is the best time to buy native plants. Because of the way that they grow, native plants and drought-tolerant plants, probably the best time to purchase them is in the fall, because you want to plant them before we have our winter rains. It gives them a chance to get their roots into the soil and establish themselves. So fall is the best time. That's when most of the growers will be releasing their plants that they've been growing over the summer. The only thing is that that's probably when they're going to look their worst, because a lot of them some are dormant, so they're going to be small, possibly like not looking that great in the fall. But if you can get them in the ground in the fall, get them through the winter with hopefully some rain, in the spring is when they really start to come alive, and they will double in size if they're healthy young plants. And also the best time to plant, sometime in our winter rain pattern, if we actually have winter rain. So this garden was put in January, and shortly after that we had a giant rainstorm and filled up the swale and saturated the soil, and all those plants got plenty of rain to last them for a while and get them established. In a year like this year, when we really only had rain once or twice, if you have a new garden, you really want to be watering these plants heavily through, well, it's too late now, but through March or April. Pretend like we're having a good rain year, and then you need to kind of wean them off through the summer. So we want to get down to watering maybe once a month, twice a month maybe for the first year, and it's soaking them and then letting them dry out a little bit in between. That's the most common question is, as a landscaper, is how much do I water, when do I water? And I'm sorry, the answer is it depends. Depends on the weather, it depends on the plant, it depends on the soil, it depends on the exposure. So it's not an easy question to answer, but you just have to kind of get to know your plants. Basic rule of thumb is if they're baby plants, you need to keep them hydrated through the first year so that they can, you plant them in this little root ball, and they need a chance to grow into the soil so that they can actually find and take advantage of the water that's in the soil. After the first year, if they're still around, you can pretty much back off, and then after maybe 2 years, you can be super lazy.
Love to tell you about my garden. I want to first echo what Laura has said today about the density of planting. When we put the garden in, I thought, oh my gosh, is this all we're putting into the garden? And I think it's obvious how lush it is just after a couple years. So don't worry, it will grow really, really fast. What I love most about the garden, so many things. First of all, the color palette. Like, it is always blooming. Something is always throwing color and lush and gorgeous. It is incredibly low maintenance. We do very little in the yard. I do get out and weed here and there, but we do keep up on it. We make sure it's mulched all the time. If I have to put in a new plant for whatever reason, I do hand water. And then I just love that it attracts bees, butterflies, birds, and probably the biggest surprise is the number of lizards that live in this yard. And they love the rocks. They sun themselves on the rocks all the time. So it's just kind of a little haven out here. I regret not doing this so much sooner. I just wanted to do something that was obviously ocean friendly and beautiful and natural, and this is it. So I can't thank Laura enough for her advice and guidance on our project.
All right, here we are with another ocean-friendly garden. And I chose this one because I want people to see how much you can do with a very small yard. You don't all have to have an estate to have a beautiful ocean-friendly garden. And this one actually does have a downspout redirect, so there is a swale in here that's funneling all the water off of the roof into the front yard and letting it sink in and retain that storm water on site. The homeowners originally did not have gutters up when they put this garden in. So although we do ask people to, if they have gutters and a downspout, to do exactly what was done here and redirect it into a swale, some homes you may not be able to have a gutter system, like for example with houses with tile roofs, for example. And in that case, what we encourage people is to still build a swale. What you have is what we call sheet flow, which is the water, comes off the roof, falls down maybe onto a hard surface like stones or a sidewalk, and then would flow into the garden. So you're still able to collect the water off of a roof, even if you don't have gutters, in a swale, in front of that area. So that's also another option if you don't have a gutter and downspout system. So let's talk about the plants. Right behind me, the first big shrub there with the blue flowers is another Ceanothus, California lilac. Again, one of our iconic California native plants. I am not sure about the exact name of that one, but it's probably concha or possibly one called Julia Phelps. It's not one of the big upright ones, and it's not one of the real low ground covery ones. It's somewhat in the middle. And there are different sizes of plants on the Ceanothus, so you have to kind of know which one you're looking for. We also have wanted to point out these beautiful lupins here behind me and in the garden. These are wildflowers, so these are annual plants. They're blooming now, and you can see them. They're actually starting to set seed pods, and these will actually die completely away at the end of the year, somewhat like our California poppies, but they will actually put enough seeds into the ground, so if they're left there, you'll have lupin again next year. And these are really wonderful, colorful plants, very tough. They look lush, but they're probably surviving and thriving just on the little water we had this year. Other plants in this garden to point out is in the back, the yellow flowered plant we have is our island bush poppy. That's the Dendromecon harfordii with the larger leaves, and that's like a teenager. So the one I had at my garden was about twice as big before it fell over. But this is a really wonderful plant. They're not easy to get established, but very long bloom period almost all year round with those bright yellow poppy-like flowers. And we also have a sage here with the lavender flowers, kind of the pointy plant. Again, iconic California plants are our sages, and that's a native sage, Salvia clevelandii. And we also have these pink mounding plants in the front here, are more of those South African pelargoniums. And I believe this is a variety called Morris Schubert. They're kind of hard to find, and I don't think I gave a shout out to the nursery in Somis called Greenwood Gardens, also known as Greenwood Daylily Gardens. He grows a lot of daylilies, but he's also a breeder and grower of many different kinds of drought-tolerant pelargoniums. So you can look him up online. He's over in the Somis area, and again, open by appointment or on the first Saturdays of the month in the spring. But he's the place to go. That's the place to go for any pelargonium varieties. These are tough little plants, small stature, great for small gardens like this. We also have some yellow tulip poppies that are the Mexican tulip poppies with the yellow flowers, and some other things we'll get a close-up on in a minute. So here we have a great example of one of our native succulents. This is again a Dudleya. I believe it is Pulveria lenta, which is our native chalk lettuce or cliff lettuce. It's not a great name, but it's a beautiful silvery succulent with that kind of powdery color to the leaves. Is actually sort of a sunscreen for the plant. And right now it's putting up these spikes of flowers because it's a happy plant. And that's one of our native succulents. We don't have that many, but this is a great example. And right behind it, that plant with the silvery leaves is another California fuchsia. So that right now is got all the growth from the spring, and then in the fall it's going to have these beautiful red tubular flowers. They're not blooming right now. This is a summer into fall bloomer as opposed to some of our spring blooming native plants. But really important in the fall for hummingbirds and other bees and insects. And we've got another Morris Schubert. And then this plant here in the middle is a low-growing type of Ceanothus. I'm not sure exactly on the name on this one. It could be Valley Violet, but you can see it's much different than its cousin right behind it, which is the upright one that I think is concha. So there's lots of different kinds of Ceanothus, and it depends on what size you're looking for and what color flower. There's some with white blue, purple, and like a dark blue. And then we've got, this is one of our smaller buckwheats here. This is red buckwheat, Eriogonum grande rubescens, and it's just starting to put up some flower stalks now. Again, it's a summer into fall bloomer, really important for native plants and native insects and bees because it blooms later in the summer. And this is just an example of another manzanita. This is a ground cover type. This is Octostaphylos pacific mist. It's very different from the tree types. Again, like the ceanothus, you got to know what size you want and then go look for the type of plant that fits that size. So from this angle, you can sort of see the swale in the middle of the yard, which is just a very shallow dip with a berm in front of it that keeps the water in this sort of valley area, and then gives it the time to settle into the soil so that it can recharge the groundwater underneath the garden. And they've got some silver blue fescues that are planted in the swale along with these nice rocks. And like a lot of grasses, the blue fescue likes a little bit more water, so being in the bottom of the swale is probably keeping it very happy. It's not a big or deep swale, but it's enough to hold the water that is shed off of the front half of the roof of this small house. So you do not need a huge area to retain rainwater, just a shallow area that's big enough to hold what we call the first inch of water off of your roof. And we have instructions in our Ocean Friendly Gardens guidebook on how to figure out how big your swale would need to be.
Okay, great. I hope everyone really enjoyed that. I know we were excited to share that with everyone. So now we will move on to the classroom portion. So I will pass it over to Laura. Let me unshare my screen. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat.
So one of the things, really, before I start the slideshow presentation, I wanted to thank you guys 110% for this effort. I'm thrilled to have this in our library. I know that everyone who is maybe tuned in a little late, or it was a lot of information that Laura gave. She did this most remarkable job, and I'm so grateful she's part of our Ocean Friendly Gardens program. But this is being recorded, and it's going to be uploaded to the Ventura Water website and will be shared to the Surfrider Foundation Ventura County Chapter YouTube channel. So we will have an opportunity to revisit all this information. And I feel like I'm going to be a little bit repetitive with what Laura explained, but you had the visual on the video. Now you're going to have more of the PowerPoint, maybe to digest the steps a little bit more. And I don't know if all of you got to get a copy of this workbook. It's the California Watershed Approach to Landscape Design in partnership with CalWEP, APLD, and G3. The Surfrider Foundation was able to contribute. This book is literally, it's incredible. It's very valuable, and it does do a step-by-step on how to make your own ocean-friendly garden. And if you are not necessarily a DIYer, you can also hire someone, let's say, just to do the design and really help you, make your vision that's in your head come to life in your yard. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. If I can, hold on one sec. There we go. So a real quick explanation about the Surfrider Foundation. It was started 35 years ago by surfers who did not want to surf in polluted water. We are committed to the protection and enjoyment of the world's oceans and beaches through a powerful volunteer activist network. Laura and I both are volunteers for the Ventura County chapter. The Ocean Friendly Garden program, as Laura explained, was started to prevent the #1 source of ocean pollution, which is urban runoff. The OFG mission is to transform landscapes and hardscapes by applying conservation, permeability, and retention, what we call CPR. So the first inch of rain after a dry period holds 80% of the pollution. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around that. We call that the first flush. And so the reason why we do have downspout redirects that go into swales in your yard is we want to keep that contaminated water out of our storm drains and out of our oceans. I'm a landscape contractor, so I would say 80% of what I'm doing right now is irrigation, maintenance and efficiency. And it's very important with any type of irrigation system that you have, that you don't have inefficient watering systems or any broken lines. As we know, never mind that, water conservation is incredibly important in the city of Ventura, but we don't want to waste any water at all. So one of the biggest things that does contaminate the water that goes into the storm drains and into the ocean is synthetic fertilizers and chemicals. One of the things we want to try to do is be completely organic and not have a lawn that would require any synthetic chemicals at all. One of the unseen sources of contaminants that goes down the street into the storm drains, again into the ocean, is car exhaust oil and brake pad dust. And one of the larger sources of microplastic pollution in the ocean is actually from car tires. It's very sad. This is taken actually for real. It's not staged. This is off of Figueroa. If you guys are familiar with the fairgrounds, obviously I'm sure you are, but right there, there's a storm drain and you're 2 seconds away from the ocean. And this was taken by one of our volunteers, if you can believe it. And it's not uncommon. That's a problem that not just the city of Ventura, but the whole county has. So obviously, this is, if you actually were at Ormond Beach in Oxnard, this is pretty much what it looks like. It's very sad, and we do extensive cleanups and have a wonderful volunteer base. If anybody's interested in volunteering for a beach cleanup, that's an aside, but you're welcome to reach out to me, chair@ventura.surfrider.org. And we are doing small group beach cleanups right now. So if you think of every property as a mini watershed, starting from the top down, and apply CPR where you can, as far as the swales and climate appropriate plants, that's really the best thing that you can do in your design. So there's C, P, and R. Now, how do I create my own ocean friendly garden? This is one of Laura's designs. It's just stunning and really beautiful and very colorful, and you can see the swale down the middle, and the plants are the right size for the space and maturity. If you are using the California Watershed Approach to Landscape Design workbook, the very first 15 pages actually goes through different designs throughout the state. You have different climates, you have different designs, and it's a really good visual reference if you're not quite sure what you want. I suggest that you just look at as many different types of plants and gardens that you can, and then it'll help guide you in your design. So in the workbook itself, on page 16, I don't know how many people actually have the workbook, but it starts to talk about the site plan on page 16. I would like to offer, if maybe Stephen and I can work together and offer to hand out some of, to anyone that wants an actual hard copy of the book. Maybe I can bring some over to the San Juan maintenance yard, and Stephen, maybe we could just leave them in the front. Stephen and I can talk about this after the presentation. So again, CPR, we have talked about that, and that's really the heart of an ocean-friendly garden. You want, when the garden's final, either commit to hand watering, as Laura said, or install a drip irrigation system, even if it's just in the beginning to get the plants started. Native climate appropriate plants. Laura had some great examples of plants that she had chosen when she designed the yards that she showed you. And we definitely want to install mulch at the end to help as it decomposes, feed the soil and allow for a better percolation and better water absorption. So one of the very first things you want to do is you want to assess your site. Most of the yards in the city of Ventura are nice rectangles. We have design templates coming up in the presentation that will give you some examples. Again, this is recorded, and I can get you this PowerPoint presentation if you're interested in seeing the different slides on your own. I can send you the link after this meeting. And when you assess your site, you have to understand what type of soil you have, and then you have to also understand how the sun is oriented in your yard, whether it's the front yard, the backyard, are there trees that are going to shade the garden? You know, does the house shade the garden in any capacity? What kinds of pathways you might want, which is really cool. I mean, in a rectangular yard, it's pretty angular. And so the swale and the pathways help kind of break that up and make it a little bit more interesting, like a little asymmetrical puzzle, like little planters, which is definitely more interesting to look at than just one big rectangular garden. I think that's probably one of the most important design concepts. So if you are a DIYer and you're going to design the garden yourself, it's really important to use graph paper and then measure your garden and draw it to scale. That way you can see literally on paper what the plants will look like at maturity, how big they are, how tall they are, and you won't over or under plant if you draw everything to scale. I think that the swale is really critical where its location is. If you do have a downspout, you want to extend it and you want to direct it into the swale. You definitely want to, again, use the formula to make sure the volume of the cubic feet, the volume of the swale itself, as opposed to the amount of estimated rainwater that will be captured on the roof that downspout feeds. It's not as difficult as it sounds. It's just math, which is not necessarily my forte. But if you go on the Ocean Friendly Garden webpage, on the Ventura County Surfrider website, there is a formula for how to figure out how deep your swale needs to be. And there is a formula to figure out how many gallons of water your roof square footage can capture. So you can figure all that out. And it really is important to be as accurate as possible. Like Laura said, it's not 100% necessary, but it is, fairly important to understand what you'll be feeding into that swale in terms of volume. So number 4 here on this slide, I think is really important. Narrow down, make the list of everything you love, make sure it works in your climate, and then narrow it down to the plants that most likely will thrive in your garden, because we definitely want it to be successful. Here's another template. Again, typical rectangular front yard, like in Ventura. And this one is like a really clean look. She's used different native plants that are procurable here locally. And they're just gorgeous. I mean, Laura had a really wonderful, offered a really wonderful tour for us to be able to see them in person. So if you can, picture another rectangular front yard, there's a permeable pathway from the sidewalk, from the driveway up to the front porch, which I think is very useful. Without having any grass there, there's no grass to walk on, so you don't want to walk in the garden, so you want to direct people onto a pathway. I think that's really important. Let me see where I am in the book. So in order to capture all of the rainwater that's possible, what if you don't have a downspout? You can, the roof water will sheet off the edge of the roof onto the front of the property, and you can build a type of swale there. You can definitely build a contour wherever the rainwater sheets. If it runs from the driveway, if the yard happens to be at an angle and it runs off the driveway into, just pay attention to where the water will drain when it rains, because we want to capture that to save as much potable water as we can for our actual consumption inside the house. So I think it's really important, if you're going to do some deep digging, to call Dig Alert. It's 811. They will come out for free and they will mark your utilities as they come up from the street. And I think it's very important to always do that, especially if you know you have some utility boxes running from the street through the area that you want to have actually be the garden. So removing the grass, this is good old Ventura, Bermuda. Removing the grass is one of the most important things that you could possibly do in terms of prepping your yard for the new garden design. There's no weed cloth that doesn't meet the ocean friendly garden criteria. You have to make sure that Bermuda is gone, and to the best of your ability, because there's a really good chance the roots are under the hardscape, under the walkways and the sidewalk, and all that needs is water and some rain and light, and then it's coming back. So the best thing you can do is to actually get a sod cutter and not disturb the soil, because we love all the wonderful microorganisms that are in the soil, and we don't want to disturb it with rototilling, but we do want to get rid of it. So I think that literally is the most important thing. So this grass is removed and it looks clean. That's one of my peeves, but it looks really clean, and I'm really happy that this picture's here. It shows the guts kind of the design and of building the garden itself. So the swale is, the angle, the house is a little bit of an angle. So the swale stops short of the sidewalk. So, and it's a little bit deeper and it makes a turn. So if there's a heavy storm, it's going to come off the downspout and go into the swale, where it's going to start to slow down a little bit, make that turn and be held. And makes all the difference in the world to capture the water and have it be, have it percolate into your own soil. It's really, really important. If those of you that have downspouts now, and even if you don't tear out your yard and tomorrow and go do an ocean friendly garden, if you redirect your I'm obviously the rainy season's over, but if you did it now and you redirected your downspouts, you kept that in the garden, in the front yard itself, it's really valuable. So you can do, the mulch, it really holds in the moisture. As it starts to decompose, it feeds the soil. That is one of the main criteria of an ocean-friendly garden. I feel like I can't stress that enough. I don't think people really understand how valuable natural mulch is. It's called green waste mulch. It's no dyes, no, processed chemicals or anything. It needs to be green waste mulch and organic for sure. So this is the beginning of the actual execution of planting this garden. After you have your design and after you have the locations of your plants, it's pretty straightforward on then doing the actual installation. As Laura mentioned, most native plants come in 1 gallons, except for maybe the trees, and makes things a lot easier as far as labor. But it also, there's historical reference to the fact that when the plant is smaller, the roots are smaller and they're planted, they develop, even a 4-inch pot grows and develops better and healthier than a 5-gallon, which is very interesting. So this is, again, Laura's recorded I think this is you, Laura. So we installed the rest of the plants in November of 2016. There's baby plants in February of 2017. 1 year later, so this is a really good reference, 1 year later. So it's gone through a cycle of summer and it's gone through a cycle of winter. And you can see the plants are maturing and developing really, really well. So now we're 2 years in. There is hand watering only. Again, I highly stress that you install a drip system to start the garden, and do recognize the types of seasons that where you do need to regular water, and like Laura was saying, maybe through April, depending on the type of winter we have, and then start to slow down through summer, and then hopefully we'll get some good rain in the late fall and winter. Those of you that are interested in a gray water system, that is not a criteria of the Ocean Friendly Gardens program, but I think that, you know, it's a good idea if you have the knowledge or you have someone that knows how to do it right. I think it's a good idea. Beautiful. So different plants have different water requirements when it comes time to irrigate. I think it's really important for you to recognize as you're building your garden design, which, you know, what the water requirements are, and that way it won't fail, because you sure don't want to overwater. Everybody that used to have a lawn has this this kind of habit of needing, you know, like, is it 3 times a week, you know, that kind of thing. So we need to wean ourselves from that kind of habit of thinking that more is better. Definitely with native plants, it's not, but again, Laura said it depends on the type of plant. It depends on the rainy season that we had or didn't have. And if it, you know, in the case of this last winter, it was kind of a bummer. So the most important thing that you could do for your garden is to have healthy soil. And part of that is using compost, and part of it is using mulch. Get all the little critters in there. Again, we're talking about using the property as a mini watershed. So now this is a traditional yard in East Ventura, and we're going to watch the evolution as it becomes an ocean-friendly garden. So the grass was taken out. You can see the downspout to the left of the slide, right next to that big rock. The downspout feeds a swale, like literally where the hose is pretty much where the swale is. So again, like Laura was saying, it doesn't have to be a dry rock riverbed. It can just be a contour, a swale that's filled with mulch. It just depends on what you want in the design, and it depends on your budget. The rocks are going to be a lot more expensive than just, you know, filling your swale in with mulch. And this is explaining a little bit about the formula for capturing rainwater. Is 1 inch of rain off of the roof itself. It gathers 0.62 gallons per square foot. So this is one of our wonderful volunteers, and this is actually the swale that you saw, or you couldn't see, actually. So it's beautiful, isn't it? Look, and it's just getting started. As it's growing, you can see the rain off the downspout is filling up that swale. Again, it's a curve, right? So it makes that turn, so it's all kept on the property and doesn't just go onto the sidewalk. And here it's growing with no supplemental irrigation at this point. A little bit of hand watering to get some of the new plants established. And this is it, mature. So right plant, right place. That's a really nice way to think about it. And Laura had some wonderful examples of the plants that she's planted and that were in these gardens that she showed us on the tour. And all of them are doing extremely well. There's a certain amount of maintenance that's required to make the gardens look as pretty as they do, but the maintenance is not nearly as frequent as if you had a lawn. So as we've explained here, she explained in the video, and as we are explaining here, the young plants need regular irrigation through their first summer to get established. And it just depends on if the planting is done in the fall, like she was saying, is the best time to do it. Hopefully we'll have a good winter rain that will help establish them. Again, pay attention to mature size. That has to do with your design and the right plant, right place. We have added, after the Thomas fire, we added this section in the slideshow for OFGs in a fire zone. And one of the things that I was super concerned about was having mulch that would be flammable so close to a house. And we do have special criteria for an ocean-friendly garden that is built with a fire, in a fire zone. And so that's basically keeping the mulch away from the perimeter of the house. So you can actually do decomposed granite. You can do gravel. Both are still permeable. If you want to look at this slideshow in later on, I can again send you the link to it. Irrigation is really, really critical. Again, you don't want to overwater your natives, but you definitely want to use the right emitters for the plant's water requirements. The city of Ventura offers a free smart sprinkler controller, a Ratio, with a rebate, and it's literally one of the best deals I've ever seen. It's a Bluetooth controlled, like off your Wi-Fi, and it's definitely water efficient, and they're really easy to use. I'm not techie, and I can use the Ratio really well. And you can go to the City of Ventura's rebate website to understand a little bit more about what the requirements are to be able to get that controller. So one of the things that I did want to explain, and Laura put this together, and it's really, really important. So taking care of your ocean-friendly garden, or any garden, especially with native plants, is much simpler and less expensive than maintaining a traditional landscaped yard with grass. You can remove the weeds by hand weeding monthly, and that's going to be seasonal. Major pruning should happen twice a year, at the end of spring and in the fall. When you're out in the garden doing your basic maintenance, you can take a look at the plant, make sure it's healthy, doesn't have any diseases. Sometimes, because we are coastal, we think that drought tolerant plants will do well anywhere, and it's not necessarily the case. And sometimes, like Laura was saying, that in Thousand Oaks or inland areas where it's drier and not as moist as it is here, we don't want to choose something that could possibly get some kind of disease and fungus from the weather. Again, no fertilizers needed, especially when you have a native garden. They want our soil. That's why, they grow here. So I don't think that the traditional soil amendments are necessary, besides composting at the beginning. We have a really good Surfrider, Ventura County has a really good website. And on the website, we have an Ocean Friendly Garden web page that you're welcome to log on to and take a look at. We have a crowd map on that webpage, and it'll tell you all of the certified ocean-friendly gardens in the county, and especially in Ventura. You can do drive-bys, and you can, if they're in the front yard, you can just look at all the different designs and how they're doing, and it's really kind of fun. And Laura showed us some of them with her tour, but we also have the web page that's got the map that can show you all of the ones. If you'd like to certify if you do take the time to convert your yard into an ocean-friendly garden and you want to get it certified, we have that wonderful sign that was in the video that once the garden's certified, you can get a sign and you can put it on your yard, and you can explain to people that you're really making a difference to not only our wildlife, our birds and our bees and our butterflies, and also you are helping to stop the #1 source of ocean pollution, which is urban runoff. And I feel like it's kind of like a home run to be able to do all these things for the community, the nature, our environment, and they're pretty too. I mean, it's like this trifecta of wonderfulness. And if you're interested in receiving our newsletter, which talks about the work that the chapter is doing, including the Ocean Friendly Gardens program and our other programs and campaigns, you can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter there. You can follow us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Instagram, and find out more about the work that we're doing. If you'd like to become a member, if you'd like to become a volunteer, you can do all of that on the website.
I'd actually forgotten a lot of those slides, so I was glad to see them again. Yeah, I mean, that was the slide presentation was mostly for people who want to do it yourself. I understand not everybody is interested in doing that much hard work, but it's most of us have small yards, and you can start a little bit at a time. Just start adding in these ocean-friendly garden principles, and I think it's something for that everybody can do. You don't need to have a whole project, and that was what we were trying to spread with the ocean-friendly gardens idea.
And one of the things that that I find that as a landscape contractor, when I talk to someone for the first time, a lot of times people don't really necessarily know what they want the garden to look like or the types of plants, but they know what they don't want. And they know they don't want wild and crazy or woolly, they don't like yellow, they don't like red. And so if you kind of even just have a starting point where you can really understand and then drive around and look at the other gardens that are out there, you can see what does well. And a lot of people think that certain plants are natives, and they're not. Just because they're common and they do well here doesn't mean they're native. So you do have to do a little bit of research and really understand what is a native here, what's a coastal native here, what's going to do well, and then it's a good start. And there's a lot of isn't Calscapes, Laura? Doesn't Calscapes have a native plant list?
Yeah, there's other resources that have showed up since we put that slideshow together. Calscape is an effort by the California Native Plant Society, and they have a new section of their website that allows people to basically design their garden. It's like a little garden design template. And then they also are part of CalFlora, which is a database basically of all native plants and invasives in California. It basically is a crowdsourced map of everything that grows that has been documented. So if you're you can go on there, you can on to CalFlora or Calscape, and you can put in your address, and then it will actually generate a list of plants that are found in your area, that have been actually documented in your area, and both native and non-native. And you can fiddle with the list, so you can look for trees, or you can look for flowering perennials, or you can look for just everything. It's a really powerful database. It's a wonderful tool, and it'll help you kind of get to know native plants. And then another resource we didn't really mention was the Theodore Payne Foundation down in near Glendale. They are one of the oldest native plant nurseries. They're a little bit out of Ventura County. They're down in LA, but they have wonderful now online classes to get people to familiar with our native plant flora, and they have hopefully they'll be having live classes again. They're a nonprofit native plant nursery, and their mission is to educate people about our native flora, and they are a wonderful source of information. And then again, if anybody's interested, they will be doing more California native plants at Ventura Botanic Garden, and Ventura Botanic Garden already has a section devoted to other Mediterranean plants, the Australian, South African, and I believe they have an aloe garden. So that's another place to go take a look at some of these things that have already been in the ground, are obviously thriving here in our climate. You can get to know these plants. Everything's labeled. It's a wonderful resource. And then also there's the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, which is the oldest native plant devoted garden in California for sure. And that's another place to go look. And they also have a little nursery, so you can find a lot of the common plants, and also some of the very more obscure natives. They do propagate a lot of plants there. They have sales twice a year. And if you're looking for something unusual, that would be the first place I would send people. Them and Theodore Payne Foundation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of plants come from Santa Barbara botanical gardens, and they are unique, and that's a great if you have time, a great opportunity during their twice a year plant sales.
And this is, we're doing this because people like plants. So get out and get to know your plants. You don't have to limit ourselves to what's available at the big box stores. And I still work in the industry, and there's a difference between what the industry grows and what maybe we should be growing, in the sense that a lot of California natives are a little bit difficult to propagate because of especially their water needs. And so we are kind of stuck in the cycle of big growers trying to grow things that are easy for them to grow, that they can, keep, that they can propagate easily, that they don't worry about crop failures on half of their plants. So, what is available in the larger growers is not always what you might be looking for. And it's sort of a feedback loop. So more demand for native plants means that they will, they'll start growing more of them.
Does anybody have any questions? I think we have about 5 more minutes, but also wanted to talk to Stephen now after the presentation to get you some books. And I can just leave them on the front doorstep of the send home your office. Is that okay?
So right now we'll work on coordinating a pickup. City facilities are still closed to the public. So I'll work with you to coordinate picking those up and then distributing those out to folks.
Great.
Again, I did put it in the chat, but we do have that workbook available as a PDF for now on the Eventbrite page. So
great.
Definitely be sure to go on, and we will send out a follow-up email that has that workbook, the PowerPoint, and this video as well. That way people can go back. There's been a lot of really good information, so I'm sure even with great note-taking skills, I don't think everyone could have gotten all that information down. So
And just one other comment that there's so many people that have worked on this project that, you know, if we seem like we know a lot, it's because there's been a lot of people that have contributed knowledge. And one of the groups that worked on that workbook and that I've been a member of is the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. And these are, you know, these are the cutting edge. These are, you know, big time landscape designers. They endorsed that booklet. It's a guild, and they are on board with all of the concepts that we talked about today. This is not off the beaten track stuff. This is what the mainstream professional designers are looking to do.
And it just happens that you can make an ocean-friendly garden at the same time. So like I said, it's like the trifecta of really taking care of your home, your environment, your wildlife, your ocean, making a healthier ocean, which is, it's pretty remarkable that we can, you know, have a beautiful garden that accomplishes all these things.
And if I could just touch on a couple of other items.
No.
So we talked about drip irrigation. So if you are interested in learning more about drip irrigation, we will be having another gardening series class on the 19th. And that will be with the Master Gardeners of Ventura County. So be sure to tune in for that one. We also just rolled out, as part of our irrigation retrofit program, we rolled out a free direct install on drip irrigation. So if you are looking to convert some of your overhead spray areas to drip irrigation, check that out. It's all on the same application as the Rachio controller. And then one other item, we had talked about gray water and rainwater capture, obviously. So at the end of the year in October, on October 23rd, we will have gray water action here, teaching us about gray water. So if you're interested in learning about those items, be sure to sign up for the future gardening series classes.
And check out the rebate for the smart controller.
Yes, I did attach a link to our rebates and incentives page.
Great.
In the chat, so be sure to check those out as well.
Yeah.
And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, sglenn@cityofventura.ca.gov, and I will put that in the chat as well.
Great.
All right. Do you guys have
should,
anything else? Any last minute questions?
Just thank you to the City of Ventura Water Department for being big helpers with our ocean friendly gardens. You guys have worked with us for many years, and we appreciate it.
Very supportive.
I definitely. Oh, go ahead, Laura.
I just said you're so supportive. It's just, you know, being a nonprofit, it's, you know, there's only so much volunteers can do, and there's only so many resources our chapter has, and you always make it so much better for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I really want to thank Surfrider Foundation for helping us out. I mean, this has been really great information, and I'm sure we'll be back next year with another event. This tends to be a really popular one, and hopefully next year we can have this in person again.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. But once again, if anyone has any questions, they can always email me, and expect to see a follow-up email with those items that we've discussed. So once again, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Thank you to Surfrider, and we'll see you on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a great holiday weekend.
You too.
Yeah.
Bye.